Hello, everyone, and welcome to Climate of Emotions. In this retreat, we're diving into emotions, climate change, and social justice. And today's panel is the final session in a series of panels and events occurring over 3 days, and including intimate small group and experiential sessions, which I believe are still going on. Thank you to everyone who has participated already and to everyone who's watching this in the future. This retreat has really been made possible by everyone who's brought their life to this project. So thank you so much. Today's theme is regenerative planning and connecting, making connections, weaving together. It's about connecting with our purpose, individual and collective, and weaving together in order to move forwards. So I'd like to introduce Kimberly Marie Brown. She's the Associate Director at the Rule of Law Program at the Carter Center. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's joining today for day 3 of Climate of Emotions. I want to start by sharing some reflections on the last year and then some tools that I've rediscovered on my personal journey towards re-envisioning our momentum towards progressive change, a healthier climate, and ultimately towards a more just and equitable world. As we all know, 13 months ago, the world was engulfed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic and its secondary impacts wreaked havoc on our already fragile world. Increased violence against women and girls, behind closed doors during lockdowns, food insecurity, economic devastation that hit particularly hard for communities that were already struggling around the world, stemming from inequalities and economic injustice already. And all of this was compounded by the existential crisis of climate change and the fate of our world, a steady global rise of authoritarianism and nationalism, which was fueling divisiveness and polarization, tremendous fractures in our multilateral systems that were already failing to meet the change and leadership needed at this moment, a renewed global demand and conversation around racial and indigenous justice, which has underscored the daily injustices experienced by so many and often stems from fundamentally broken policies, systems, and institutions that have perpetuated intergenerational harm and trauma. On top of it all, we saw a global rise in anxiety, stress, depression. We had a raging global mental health crisis on our hands. The sheer magnitude of human loss continues to bear down on us around the world and remind us that the pandemic rages on. These converging crises are enough to overwhelm anyone. This last year, no matter what corner of the world you've been in, and even if it manifested in different ways or forms, grief has been heavy on all of our hearts. I struggled to maintain a grasp on my beliefs that as humans, we always move forward in a collective experience together and that the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice. This is something that I have always believed in my core throughout my life and my career. And as a human rights lawyer who has lived and worked on 4 continents, I've seen some of the worst in humanity in my career, whether egregious and inhumane cases of sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls, or crimes against humanity perpetuated by the Khmer Rouge while working in the office of the co-prosecutor at the tribunal in Cambodia. I've also seen some of the best of humanity, whether it's been working with communities to fight for justice around protection for human rights and protection against harm and provision of services, learning from African feminist movement actors and voices about the importance of coalition building and centering visions for change alongside contextual and community realities, or if it's been through witnessing the rebuilding of new legal regime, constitutional orders, and systems that have all been unshackling themselves from colonial vestiges to imagine what a better future can look like for all. 2 weeks into the pandemic, I was in lockdown alone in a new city that I had just moved to, distance from what had become my home and chosen family for the last decade in Nairobi, Kenya, my newfound Obama Scholars family, as well as my community of friends and colleagues that I had grown close to over the years. All in all, I was lucky. I had a family within a few hours' drive away, 4 walls and a roof over my head and the security of a stable job. But at a personal level, I was shaken to the core. And it was a challenging year for me to be separated from the work that I do, the communities of support for myself, and alone and grappling with my own purpose and direction. Amidst what felt like chaos, I slowly and imperfectly so began to rediscover my footing. And so as we dive into the conversation this evening, about regenerative planning and really talking about how we find our sense of purpose and driving forward change, really, I want to share with you 3 things that have grounded me and propelled me forward and re-energized me for the work ahead. Number 1 is redefining joy. For me, redefining joy this year has been critical to and a saving grace. That includes reconnecting with people in my inner sanctum who make me feel seen and heard. It means making sure I find time to connect with loved ones. I come from a big family. I have a loving group of sisters, a brother, my father and mother, and my nieces and nephews who bring me so much joy. I indulged in gardening, cultivating life and small plants. I think I'm up to 100 at this point in the year. And cultivating their well-being really gave me a sense of purpose to really drive through on a day-to-day basis. The outdoors, a hike, a bike ride, finding time for a sunset or finding a flowing river, it had a cathartic impact on my well-being. Friendship, cultivating friendship. Friends for me are the great loves of my life. And in my life, cultivating meaningful friendships is incredibly important. And I found over this year in particular, investing in that helped drive me towards joy. And of course, laughter. Laughter is truly, as we all know, the best medicine. And finding time and space for that has helped me to redefine joy this year. The second tool in my toolbox this year has been seeking out hope. Despite all the laundry list of negative things that I walked through at the beginning, there was a need to seek out hope. Despite all the overwhelming challenges, this year also reminded me in the power of people coming together, united to drive positive change, and seeing that to be a wondrous thing. While I've believed that and seen that, seeing it in action has been incredibly important. I also am finding hope in moments of the power of science and innovation, especially given the speed with which we were able to generate a vaccine. While I'm cognizant of all the challenges around vaccine access inequalities, I also am really hopeful that we can leverage both science and innovation to combat the challenges that we continue to face, but also will face in the future. I also find great hope and accountability, whether it's been at the polls, before legislative bodies, whether in courtrooms or in the court of public opinion. Accountability we've seen to be a powerful tool, and I think it has always been necessary to underpin a just future that we all want. Lastly, for me, in finding hope was finding and making sure I sought out my audacious group of human beings that share my worldview. For me, that's made all the difference. Having them echo and make me feel seen and echoing the vision that we want for the world has been incredibly important. The third and final tool that I want to share with you all is the concept of revolutionary love, which I discovered through Valerie Kaur's See No Stranger book and her Revolutionary Love Project. And no, I'm not talking about romantic love. I'm talking about the construct of love as a premise for all social justice work. I've adopted Valerie's definition to drive my own work. And in her own words, revolutionary love is a wellspring of care, an awakening to the inherent dignity and beauty of others and the earth, a quieting of the ego, a way of moving through the world in relationship, asking, what is your story? What is at stake? What is my part in your flourishing? Loving others, even our opponents, in this way has the power to sustain political, social, and moral transformation. This is how love changes the world. The concept of revolutionary love uses a compass through rooted guidance on 3 core pillars, which includes loving others, so seeing no stranger in those around us and those that we encounter, who may be new to us in some way or form. It includes loving opponents. And this is often one of the hardest things, which is really, even through rage, finding a way to love those who are on the other side of the aisle. And then, of course, importantly, and really at the crux of success, is loving ourselves. This is really the concept of taking care of ourselves and finding ways of breathing and pushing forward to continue to cultivate the world that we want. I'm wishing you all love and light on your journeys as you help drive the change that you are committed to. And over to you, Em.
Wow, Kimberly, thank you so much. I feel really humbled to be able to speak with you today. That was beautiful. And I am also really excited to welcome some other amazing speakers. So first, one of the key ideas of emergent strategy is small is all. And it's about the fractal nature of change and what changes within us at small scale can ripple outward to change the world. And I think that really resonates with what Kimberly was speaking about on love. So in that note, could each of you please introduce yourself, except Kimberly, and tell us what is one change that you are working on making in the way you move through the world to make the world a better place? So starting at the small scale. And Hoang, would you like to start? And then we'll go around.
Thank you, Anne. And Kim, wow, you had such a moving speech, really. Oh my God. You really moved, like really make me feel like, this is it. That's her. Hello, everyone. This is Hoang. I'm from Vietnam. I'm based in Ho Chi Minh City in the south, if you ever visited my country. I'm the founder and now running my own environmental NGO in Ho Chi Minh City called Change. And I created Change just because I hope that I can mobilize young people to build change together so we can create positive changes in Vietnam and also in the world. And as you mentioned, love, Kim, I just realized that actually one small thing, one small change that I had over the years was that how I changed the reasons for me to act. So I have always been thinking that a lot of activists like us act out of emotions. We act because we're angry, because we're scared of climate change. We're scared of what my children can face. And we act when we're so angry at those polluting industries. But then realize that just very recently, I seem to not really act out of anger or fear or any negative emotions. We all, of course, with my other young people at Change, we all act out of love. So my kids who came from the Mekong Delta and suffering from all these climate change, they act out because of their love for their own homeland. And I have been doing all this just because I love my son so much and I want him to grow up into that beautiful future. So that is just one change that I just realized that, and you just like gave me that answer right now, Kim. Thank you so much for that. And hello, everyone again.
Shomi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Xiomara. I'm from Barranquilla, Colombia. I'm an activist, climate and environmental activist, and also a social entrepreneur. I created my NGO too, that is Barranquilla Más 20, which mission is to educate and empower children and youth to build sustainable territories and cities. Because, yeah, I think that we are living in these mega diverse lands, and we feel that this is what we needed to protect, because this is the most important heritage that we can have, like for this generation and for the others to come. And one change that I also manage in myself is to be less impatient, because when we are working for people, for nature, and in movements, we need to understand that even we are not achieving like the bigger victories, we need to also celebrate the small victories that we are achieving in all the causes and projects and campaigns that we are developing. For me, this was a learning, because we need to value the work that we are doing, even that this is not, like reaching the most transformative solution at the biggest scale. But since we are doing something different and we are bringing change at the local scale, I think this is also important. And this is a change that I also introduced by myself, like to know how to celebrate these small victories, as we call here in Barranquilla, Más 20, our small victories, our small wins, and try to process this to get more force and more spirit to continue working. And it's been 9 years of these climate and environmental struggles. So that's one of my learnings. And there are 10,000 reasons like to fight for and advocate in Colombia and in the world. So it's easy sometimes to feel despair, but we need to continue. And that spirit and that energy comes from the small wins that we have.
Thank you, Xiomara. And Kimberly, is there anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I would just say I really like both of the points that were made by Xiomara and Hoang. I think the only thing I would say that I've been trying to work on myself is also listening. In addition to the patient side of things, as the lawyer in me likes to cultivate an argument to support my worldview and move forward in that. And I realize to bring change, I also have to listen to the other side. And especially in social and people change, if you're going to change hearts and minds, you really have to listen and understand where they're coming from and to win them over as an ally and to really get them on your side. So I think for me, that's something that has not been a strength, but it's certainly something that I'm working on in my own work to really forge stronger connections.
Thank you. Those were really great answers. I'd love to hear from people listening now or watching or in the future. Can you comment in the chat what's something that you're trying to change about the way you move through the world to further justice? For me, one of my things right now is trying to choose more effectively when to have a sense of urgency and when to try to let go and be more in process, because I think sometimes it's not the most effective way to go about things. But so at Climate of Emotions, we are really believing in individual change, like the way that I am in the world matters, and the way that I am in my relationships matters, and the way that our family group, people group, your family group, my family group, move through the world and connect together is going to make meaningful change. But let's dissect that for a minute. Like, there are a lot of different models of change out there. So I want to ask you all, have you focused in the past on more top-down or bottom-up models of change? Why? And what model of change do you focus on now? So how do you think we're going to do this? Hoang, do you want to start?
Okay, thank you. I think my approach, after many years working for environmental NGOs and being an activist on my own, and I had realized that, to address all these super challenging issues that we're facing, climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, we need systematic change, like systems change. But that sometimes can become super difficult, especially in a less democratic regime, like my country. And I suddenly started to see the power in small changes. But if we can connect them all and make the whole super collective small change together, then we can create the big change that we want. And so the moment I decided to found change was when I realized that all this, even one big INGO or even UN or World Bank would not be able to solve all this global crisis. But if we can mobilize, we can inspire, we can engage every single person in the society to do something, to do the tiny, teeny, small change, but we do it all together, then we can make that change. So the whole idea about change is about, we build an I change movement. So basically a movement that everyone would be the leader of their own action, of their own community. So we build this community-led movement throughout the country where every university or every youth group, any community group can set up their own I Change movement. And then they will do whatever it takes to reduce their own impacts on the environment. And it worked, because it's not only that we create changes in people's behavior change, okay, reducing plastics, reducing emissions, but in the end, they are more aware, they have more power, and they are more confident in themselves being able to make the change on the environment or the corporate policy. And so with this power that we built among the community, then the business sector started to see that the pressure from the public, and the government started to notice that, hey, the public general awareness had been increased, and they demand the change. And that's when the government started to take action as well. And so absolutely bottom up, but it's very key how we have to make every individual to see that they have the power. And that's the change that I want to build in my movement. Thank you.
Thank you, Hoang. We have some really wonderful comments coming up from people tuning in from different places. Xiomara, do you want to add to what Hoang said? What is your model of change now? What has it been?
Yeah, I think it's quite also similar, because Hoang also is from Vietnam, which I think we also, like, even we are in different regions, we have some similarities in the movements as part of the climate movement. And I also prefer the grassroots model of change. I've been fascinated, like, in my experience working with local communities in mega diverse countries like Colombia. The responsibility of conserving ecosystems, land, water is like given to people in the rural communities that are indigenous, Afro-descent, rural farmers. So I consider that these people are not effectively involved in the environmental decision-making processes, and that's why I also needed or identified that there was a gap that needs to be filled, because if we want to have environmental governance and we want to have environmental peace here in Colombia, we need to create bridges for these people to influence the processes of environmental policies. And their voices have been excluded historically. So my main interest is to work with these people, for these people, so they can be heard. Their necessities can be also heard, because they are developing a great mission for all of us, but they are not recognized. Their involvement is not recognized, their work is not recognized, and they are in danger because of taking care of ecosystems and nature. They're being killed systematically here in Colombia because of their environmental defender work. And I consider that this needs to shift. So grassroots change for me, it's really important. And that's how I, try to support these communities, working with them, trying to create strategies to also make their voices and try to influence the decision-making processes. We have achieved very cool stuff here, like the recognition of the rights of nature, and also the recognition of the biocultural rights of these people as an important driver for environmental governance in Colombia. So I think that this is what I, prefer, the grassroots power, because I feel like there's a lot of learning that needs to be recognized.
Thank you, Xiomara. And Kimberly, I'm really interested to get some slight different perspective from you, because we have a lot of support for grassroots movement here, and you come from a legal perspective, right?
Yes.
So what can you add here?
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things when I really started working in development work, my work was really around coalition building with communities. And so I think that what has been imperative for me as I've moved to then working with governments from the activist space and the marches and the noise making and the campaigning and all of that, what I started to realize as well was that sometimes, and I'm not by any means generalizing, but in some of the instances, I realized that when I started working with different government ministries, and particularly here, I'll focus on gender or justice issues, and I would find that there were one or two people in the entire ministry that were tasked with handling these issues for the entire country. And so what I saw my role, and I see my role as still as a facilitator to connect the dots between the top down, what has been the formal systems approach of government and the law and policy, and then giving voice and agency to communities and people to make sure that there are both people-powered laws and policies, but that there's public participation in the processes, and that also that when we're talking about solutions that we're trying to find for whether it's countries, communities, contexts, or certain issues, that they're driven by people who are experiencing the problem. And people have the solutions. And often what the challenge is that you'll find with governments or otherwise, when they're given a overwhelming mandate and they're given lack of resources to kind of deal with the issue, they're not really given a blueprint on how to come up with the solutions. And they sometimes have prescriptive solutions or totally off the wall solutions. But when you bring the two worlds together, that's, in my experience, when you find a best case scenario solution. And I also think that one of the things, going back to the idea about patience with change and finding the small wins, I've also come to really appreciate that change is fluid, and it also, we have to be transparent and honest that even as we have a win in a law or a policy or even a case, all of those things, these are just stepping stones and building blocks, because the people power still has to move along with that, as in terms of implementation and in terms of really seeing the change that we want to bring about. So I think there's a way to have an equilibrium of both, but it requires conscious effort and investment across the board.
Kimberly, I really appreciate the complexity that you just added and that we have all together in these different perspectives, trying to find that balance. And yeah, we'll talk more about the community level in a moment. But going back to individual, I'd love to hear in one sentence, if possible, what is your noble goal from each of you? But I don't even still know my noble goal, because I've been trying to figure it out. And this is maybe you can see in the chat potentially about what and how noble goal differs from more goal-oriented goals. But for me, I think being in relationship with land and like greater than human world while pursuing equity is really important. But I still don't know quite how I can do that in everything I do. So let's see how you folks are going. In one sentence, what is your noble goal? And let's go Xiomara, Kimberly, and then Hoang.
Wow. Well, I think my noble goal in life is to work with and for nature, for its recognition beyond the environmental economic focus and market-based strategies. That's it.
I don't know how I'm supposed to assume that was great. And I don't know how you were able to get it into that quick. My brain is still reeling. I mean, I'll try, I guess. But I think my noble goal is that I try to show up authentically to the issues of building to the issues of justice and inclusion. So hopefully we can chip away and build a better world. That for me, those are two kind of driving forces in various things. But I think authenticity is really important to how I show up in different spaces. And it's important, especially as we move forward and all the work. Yeah, I think it's something that can be a challenge sometimes with this work.
Okay, my noble goal, I don't know if it's noble, but I have been always set the very clear goal that I will have to inspire and empower young people in Vietnam, at least the community, youth community around me, to have the capability, the capacity, but also the resources to do what they think is good for their community. And I'm saying that just because young people, they have all this passion and dedication, and they're smart and they're so tech savvy and they have all these potentials, but in most cases, grown-ups don't see their potentials and they just look at them like, what do you know? And I just want to make sure that the government and business sector see their role and then their capacity. I'm sorry, but young people are definitely better than me in so many ways. And I'll just make sure that all Vietnamese people see that too.
Thank you all. And I'd love to see from the chat if anyone is sharing what their noble goal is. And if you're watching now, yep, thank you, Leon. Please share in the chat, what is your noble goal? Have a think about that. Thank you. And building off of that question, again, let's try to keep these short answers. I think it's important before we start finding communities that we want to pursue our purpose with, how do we know if we are in line with our purpose? So my question is, when you're connected with your purpose, what are some feelings and emotions that support and guide you to help you know that you're in line with your purpose? What does it feel like to be in line with your purpose? Whoever is feeling like they can answer. Kimberly?
Sure. I feel happy and I feel energized. I feel there's a sense of kind of kinetic energy when I'm connected with others that I'm working on. I mean, that for me is always the biggest sign that, almost like brave wavelengths going off between, with the kinetic energy, with the people that you're working with, and like that feeling of like, okay, we're in this together, and that sense of collectiveness that's when I know that I'm connecting to my purpose. That energy and it brings you joy. I think that's sometimes when I'm not finding joy, then I need to pivot, or I need to find something is not serving me, so I need to change.
Thank you. Sumi, do you want to add on that?
Wow, that's a very thoughtful question too. But definitely, I feel like we know that we're doing things like well because, first of all, we are being inclusive, and when I feel like our activities in daily life too are promoting inclusion, respect to people and nature. I mean, this is a good feeling for me to, to always continue working and continue doing what I'm doing. And this is very connected to my purpose too. Also, to revalue the role that we as human beings are having in the world, because I feel like we are not understanding that we are just another species in this ecosystem of life. And this feeling too that we are renewing the role of human beings, that we are inviting people to understand that if you are going against nature, you're going against you. It's like also one of the feelings that are connected to my purpose of trying to advocate for nature as the sense of life. And here in Colombia, it's life doesn't have a lot of value, and it's very easy to lose it. So understanding the meaning of life, that is the meaning of nature, is, you know, like one of those feelings that are connected to me.
For me, I feel that I am connected to the mission and everything I'm trying to do when I recognize emotions of the team working with me. And I realize that because we are trying to solve all these super big problems, I think it will be very difficult for my young kids, only 20, 25 years old, to really understand all this, like how they can do that if they don't have the personal emotions in their own life that's connected to what we are doing. So I have this team coming from different provinces who's coming to the office and say, hey, Chị Hồng, yesterday my house in the Cần was flooded with a high tide. And they have that daily reminder of how all these things that we are trying to do is so connected to their own personal life and their family and their future and everything. And I have realized that that's the most important fuel that we need to bump in the work that we do every day to make sure that people do it because they feel angry, they feel scared, they feel happy, they feel joy of achieving all these small victories you just mentioned. I had gone through like the most scary moments of my life, the most angry or the most dreadful and the most hopeless moments of my life in my career. But we also had these amazing, happy and hopeful days when we achieved something or when we got some compliments from even the government or the community or the artists who work with us. And I think it's super important when we just like really recognize that, hey, I am aware of your emotions, I recognize that, and please use that. And it's how a lot of us just put IQ such an important KPI for your team. But for me, EQ, emotional intelligence, is really important. And I think we have to find a way to make sure that activists and social changes in the world are aware of this, and so we can be more confident and a lot stronger when we connect like that, work and emotions.
Thank you, Hoang. That's very in theme with Climate of Emotions and the work of 6 Seconds. So I'm really happy to hear that that's important in your work. And Xiomara, thank you for bringing in all the focus on nature and what you said about humans being just another species and we are nature. I think that's so important to orienting in this work. And in that line of nature, in Climate of Emotions and in Emergent Strategy, there's this metaphor of our communities, our communities working for justice, of the murmuration of starlings. Where these birds can move together in these beautiful shapes through the sky with no apparent leader. Each bird is paying attention to the 7 birds around it and staying in right relationship with that bird, staying at the correct distance, focusing and communicating and moving in this way. And that could be a metaphor for our movements, which kind of reminds me of the I change Hoang was talking about. When each person is there, then we flow together. And so my first question about this would be, who is your flock? And how are they fueling your work? How does that resonate for you? Xiomara, do you want to start? Who is your flock of people or greater than human beings?
Well, I think that the grandmas, the grandpas, but also the children, they are fueling our work and my spirit. Their learnings, their stories, their capacity to work and open the path for people like me and others. It's something, that inspires me and also makes me aware of the responsibility that I have and we also have to continue the environmental path. So I think that these intergenerational exchanges and these people, from different generations and different ethnicities and realities brought a lot of knowledge and a lot of passion that continue fueling my work and my passion for nature and people. Because as I say, nature is people. So when you love nature, you also learn to love the people that feel it inside.
Thank you. And Kimberly, what about you?
This is, I won't focus necessarily on the flock of the other change agents necessarily, but I think I'll focus on for me, the flock who helps me define justice. Because I think there's a lot of notions of what justice is, and it's, moving through a formal justice system, and it's, moving through a court process sometimes, or, getting a win in that way. And I think for me, one of the biggest inspirations in my life and through my work that has kept me moving has been, whether it's been survivors of grievous harm who still remain optimistic that they and their story and their journey can bring about change. And they view law and justice as a pathway to getting one avenue of the full vision of justice of what they want. But also those in my work that have helped me also look at justice for all being more encompassing, that justice is also about being seen and heard. When a harm is committed, it's not always about a big case or a lawyer or any of those things. It's really also about sometimes having a forum to share what has happened and to say, I don't necessarily need something as for the harm that's happened, but I want to ensure this never happens again moving forward. And I think that those people and communities that I've worked with that have shown me a more expansive view of what justice can be, have really been my flock and really helping define what justice can be and what a truly just future can also look like.
I don't know if you have seen this very fun meme on the internet somewhere. There's a picture of a speaker who's talking to an audience, and he asks, "Who wants change?" And everyone raised their hand. And he asked the second question, "Who wants to change?" And no one raised their hands. So I think the ability to dare to change is such a strength that not everyone has. And so my flock are basically the people around me or the people in the community, people anywhere in the world who dare to overcome their bias, prejudices, and weaknesses and everything to change something about themselves, to make the change, the bigger change in the long run. And to do that, it's when you make a change, sometimes you look very weird to people around you, because people usually have that social norm where if you suddenly someone acts differently, they will look at you like, hey, you're crazy. And they will have all this kind of shaming and prejudice, which is like definitely the things that I and my team experience so often. And to overcome that, we will have to build this community of the people who dare to change and stay there and see around you and see, people also are like me, and you feel less lonely and less scared, less intimidated by the fact that, hey, I just want to change. And the thing is, sometimes so we have this Facebook group, I Change Community, we call it. So anyone who feel lonely would go there and see that I'm not the only weird person. And I think it helps a lot. Like the young people who get back to me and say, yes, when I come here, I feel like that the things that my parents said to me last night just didn't hurt me as much anymore. You know what I mean? And so that's so important, that you build that flock, you build that community, and you just reassure each other that we are doing good things. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, the flock will need also the people who don't necessarily see your point or get you and change, but the people who see your weakness and see your weak moments and understand you and empathize with you. And I see a lot of that in Kim and in all these Obama scholars who are so far away. They are half the sphere away. I just talk to them like every three months or something. But they are the soldiers that I can cry on. They are the one who don't work on environment or exactly what I am doing, but they know what I'm going through, what pain I'm having. And they say, hey, I'll cry it out, and I can cry it out. I think the flock will need that people as well. And I'm grateful that I have those people in my life.
And if I can say one thing I just wanted to add to that, like there was something that was said, I don't remember where it came up, but it was essentially around sometimes in this work, as much as you'll have your flock of people, sometimes when you're thinking audaciously about the world, it can be really lonely. And when you want to envision a better future, and some people, it can be lonely, and it can, and even if you have your friends talking about your crazy ideas or your crazy vision of the world, in my experience, I have felt very lonely. And I think that one of the things that has really helped is, like Hoang was saying, is you find that crazy group of human beings who also shares that view of the world, and, also is willing to dig in and do what it's worth. Because I think that, even having one or two people who can share that view with you it can make all the world of difference, especially in the tough days, because tough days do come in this work, no matter which sector or sphere of the work that you work on. There are really tough days where you want to throw it all away. And so I think that accountability framework also, not only for support, but they also can hold you accountable to say, hey, like this is who you are, and push you back on track, which I think is important.
Kimberly, thank you for that transition, because I was just going to ask about, given that you folks have some of your flock, what are your recommendations for people who might be feeling isolated in their purpose? And as Kimberly said, even people who do have found kind of their flock, that this work can be isolating. So Xiomara, do you have any advice for people who might be watching and are feeling isolated and overwhelmed in their purpose and are struggling to find their flock?
It's important to remember that our purpose is bigger than the obstacles. Even it can sound like cliche, our purpose in life, our dreams, our ideals are bigger than bad moments, temporary moments in life. So we never lose the capacity to dream and not only dream, but to achieve. So it's important also to know this, believe this, because, bad moments, we all happen for, bad moments, and we also have like low moments in life, but we then redefine, think things, do some changes, and then arise again. So it's important to rise, and it's important to have our value, recognize that we are bigger than obstacles, and we never as humanity lost our capacity to create, innovate, and dream. We're more than this. So that's my, that'd be my message for those persons that maybe are like somehow like, finding their way. It's also fine to feel like this. It's important to redefine and rise.
Beautiful message of hope, Xiomara. Thank you. Hoang, I mean, it's hard to go after that, but do you have anything you want to add? You have to unmute yourself, though.
Talking about being lonely, I just remember one fact that I found out 2 days ago. My Ho Chi Minh City, the biggest city in Vietnam, we have 15 million people in this city. There are about 400,000 business enterprises, 400,000. And there are less than 5 local environmental NGOs in this city. So no matter what I kind of brag about how I have built my green community, we are still super lonely compared to so much bigger business community or tech or startup community. All those communities are so much bigger than ours. So we do feel lonely and isolated. I totally agree. I get it. And especially when I have been always like bragging like, hey, we are the leader of our own and we can manage this change, blah, blah, blah. I am aware that younger people around me feel even more scared of their loneliness. And so I always try to make them see my real me. Hey, look at me. I'm super dynamic. I'm super hyper. I'm always like doing something. But it's super important that you have time for yourself as well. So when you just like sit there for hours and play with your cat, saying nothing, and that's super valuable. It's when you see that, yes, all this frustration out there is like, okay, it's just outside there. Here I have my cat. Usually it's my cat who just release a lot of my stress. But I think it's very important that people will have other kinds of happiness and joy and fun, friends, shopping, even whatever, or cat or pet or traveling alone, whatever. You always have that as a plan B for your dark days. Otherwise, you're just like, you can't really overcome your own sadness. So yeah, I highly recommend that. Find the other funds that would make you happy no matter what. And usually it's pets.
Thank you, Hoang. And we are unfortunately running out of time. I've just loved this conversation so much. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to ask you a closing question, though. And Kimberly, you can start, and then Hoang, and then Xiomara. Let's end on a note of optimism. In a world that often feels very divided and polarized and overwhelming, and we have these dark days, what helps you hold on to a sense of the connectedness of all life?
Oh, just an easy question to end on. I think for me, it's twofold. One is the self-care aspect that Hoang was just mentioning, and also what Xiomara was mentioning about centering your purpose. And for me, that is what happens really in that self-care space. But also for me, it's getting often out into nature, and it's making, even if it's shutting off, for technology sometimes can be a lot of noise. But for me, it's shutting down that space and allowing my mind and my heart to connect with the space around me, and whether it's a bike ride, whatever it may be, a walk, and to really be present in that moment, to feel what I'm feeling. And I think that for me is something that allows me to quiet any other noise that may be happening, and to feel a kind of a connection with what's happening beyond, and also the smallness of myself and all of that, to really take it into perspective. So that's, for me, self-care and nature are the kind of two things that I would say, that's how I center myself.
Is it me? Okay. So in my work, we have to use a lot of social media. Facebook, especially, is the one that really gives us the chance to talk to millions of people without really having to go to see the million people. And I think social media have helped us so much in our building awareness and changing behaviors and stuff. But definitely there are super negative sides of being on social media, because all these bad news and fake news and haters really make you totally lose your energy for the day. And I think it's important that we, as we're trying to make all these beautiful things for the world, you just don't let those negative emotions and informations and feelings to submerge you. When there are haters posted on my Facebook about like how they hate me, I would try to recognize their points, but I would find a way not to make whatever they say submerge me. Like really, I think it's important that I always have people, and I always connect to the people who make me feel good. It's important that you need to have that encouragement, support, although they are words, but they are super helpful, and it's very needed for our work. You have to connect to the people who make you feel good about yourself, and make you feel that you can continue to believe in your cause, and make you believe in the changes that you're making, because they recognize that. I think it's super important to have that person in your life, people, not just person, and try to not really, Michelle Obama say, when they go low, you go high. Yes, exactly. Don't lower yourself to the haters, because that really drag all your energy down. You just stay who you are, be positive, make the change that you want to make a change, and help the people around you feel the same. I think this is what that have been helping me survive until now.
Thank you so much, and Xiomara.
Okay, nature doesn't have boundaries. As this, it's something that also makes me realize when I enter the environmental space, is that this cause makes people to come together, to convene. There are other causes in society that divide us, but nature and environment is one of those causes that I feel that make people come together. So this is something, very important for me, because instead of reinforcing all differences that exist in society, in politics, in other causes that divide people, nature put us together as humanity. And this is what, also makes me passionate about the environmental space, because there are a lot of things that can, like divide society, and that politicians take advantage of those divisions to put narratives of hate and despair, a lot of things, negative things. But the language of nature is putting people together, is a narrative of transformational change and of not recognizing boundaries and limits, so all societies as ecosystems can live and coexist together. So, like, learning about this, learning about how nature works, about the connection and the biocultural connection that we have with nature is one of those senses that make me feel coherent in the life that I'm taking and in the path that I'm walking through. So yeah, I will say that again, the answer is in nature, and yeah, that's one of the feelings that made me also like consistent with my purpose.
Wow. Thank you all so much. I feel like really grateful and humbled to be together with you. And I feel this alignment of purpose with all of you, like resonating when you speak, which is really appropriate given that we're talking about flocking together. So I feel like we've just modeled flocking together around purpose. And I hope that people in the chat watching now and later have felt some of that stirring that I've felt. Please leave a message in the chat about how you're feeling and what makes you feel connected to the rest of the world and all of life and nature. Yeah, and I think that's us.
Well, I'm Josh Friedman. I'm the CEO of 6 Seconds, and I just wanted to come in at the end here and say thank you to the panelists, and thank you to Em. I think the truth is, if I let myself feel all the feelings that came up for me in this conversation, I wouldn't be able to talk, because the sense of spaciousness and possibility that you shared, I guess a simple word is hope, but that sense of possibility, of alignment with self, of feeling ourselves as part of nature and connected. It's such a vision that is so delicious that just imagining it brings tears into my eyes. And I'm grateful that we had this time together. And I'm looking forward to the ripples of this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing and for being here and for your work. Thank you, people who are here watching live and watching the recording. And we hope that you have had a inspiring and renewing and regenerative experience at Climate of Emotions. And we're looking forward to continuing this conversation and this work together.